Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition. Oh, thank you very much for the subscription there, Kyle. As I was saying, oh my god, threw me off there. Welcome back to our play-by-email game of War in the Pacific. We're playing as the Allies in this series. I think this is actually, is this episode 50? I think it's episode 50. And we're playing as the Allies against XTRG, who is playing as the Axis. XTRG, as you all are well aware, is pushing very strongly in the South Pacific. New Caledonia is on the verge of being defeated. He has not yet pushed super strong in the Dutch East Indies, although... that may be changing. We had a tripwire of submarines, I believe, this turn that were set up to try and intercept some ships of his that looked like they were moving toward the island of Celebes, or is that how you pronounce it? Celebes? You can see here, it looks like they're landing some troops on Manadao, or at least bombarding Manadao here on the eastern tip of Celebes. So this is the beginning of the Japanese offensive against the Dutch East Indies. These are some critical islands. There's some high-value bases. There's some bases that have decent airfields. Once he gets long-range bombers into Kandari or to Mascar, that's really going to shut down the Dutch East Indies, and it's going to allow him basically to shut off access to Java and sort of the central southern portion of the Dutch East Indies, as well as Borneo. So once he takes Kandari and Mascar, this whole area becomes very more or less untenable, and it just becomes a matter of time. And you can see here he's landing troops on Manadao already. So this may be the beginning of the end for Allied forces in the Dutch East Indies. Certainly preliminary, right? It's going to take a couple of weeks at the earliest. It's going to take him 2 to 3 weeks, I would guess, to kind of lock down all those bases. But nonetheless, it's the beginning of his offensive there. I'm curious how much he's landing, though. Oh, there is a troop transport there. I was going to say all I had seen was light vessels, nothing heavy, but there is an AP there. So I think it was last turn we had some torpedo hits on an AP, and they were all duds, so we got a bunch of Mark 14 specials. Again, was it last turn or 2 turns ago in that region? Meanwhile, we can see he's moving some anti-submarine warfare vessels off the coast of Miri. Perhaps he is starting to consider pulling oil out of there. He's really not taken any oil or fuel out of the Dutch East Indies yet, so it's kind of interesting to see, you know, how sluggish he's been there. It's really allowed us to pull a lot of fuel out of the Dutch East Indies, and frankly, the Australian economy is being powered entirely by Dutch oil to this point, which is a nice little thing there, because I don't have to worry about bringing tons of oil from the U.S. I've brought a little bit of oil from the U.S. I think I brought like 75,000 oil into New Zealand, and then about 50,000 oil into Australia from the U.S., but the bulk of the oil, some 300,000 units of oil, have already been brought into Australia in the first month, just from the Dutch East Indies alone. Looks like there's a Japanese fighter sweep occurring over Changsha, 36 Ki-43-1 Oscars, sweeping at 25,000. Some recon going on here. Pretty quiet turn so far. That landing in Celebes is definitely substantial from an importance perspective, but nothing else that we've seen occurring yet. Another sweep over Changsha. More Oscars. And a bombing raid over Changsha. 44 Ki-21 Sallies with 27 Ki-27B Nates in support. We may want to throw up our Flying Tigers to see if we can intercept any raids he may be sending there. They did a fair bit of damage, 95 casualties there. Meanwhile, some bombers hitting Bataan. I'm going to fast forward through there. Only 13 Lilies. Looks like they're going after the airbase supply and runway. 5 of his aircraft damaged by flak. 16 unescorted Sallies coming in toward Changsha. Another 36 casualties. No squads destroyed, but a fair bit of disruption occurring there. Changsha seems to be a major area of effort for him. Looks like we've got a troop or a cargo ship. The clan Makragan is getting hit by Japanese Kate B5N1 Kates. It's unfortunate he's using bombs. I guess I had hoped he would use torpedoes against them, because he only has a limited number of torpedoes on those light carriers, which he certainly has light carriers there. We know his fleet carriers, or at least the majority of them, are down near Australia. So, anyway, he's using up some sorties and some supply, but not using up his very limited stockpile of torpedoes. And by limited, I mean a good example is the Hermes, which is pretty typical. I think the Japanese might get 2 reloads per plane for torpedoes. But like the Hermes has, I think it is 12 torpedoes for an air wing of 12 swordfish. So it's basically you've got one shot and then you got to return to port to rearm. Okay, a bunch of recon reports. J Street, I'm not sneaky. Thank you, by the way, Kyle, for the sub. I really do appreciate it. Okay, we've got a couple of 139 WH-3s going after Japanese shipping. Looks like another... That's interesting. So he's landed at Manadao, but then we've also spotted at least one enemy troop transport here, the Kamakura Maru, in Ternate, just off Ternate. It'll be interesting to see if they're moving east toward Ternate or if they're moving west down toward Kendari or Mascar. I'm really curious to see how that shapes out, because that means he's doing multiple offensives simultaneously. He's not just going for Manadao, locking that down, and going for something else. He's going for maybe Ambion or Kendari or another major base down here to really try and just in one fell swoop, presumably, crush our effective resistance in the region. Which is concerning. I mean, we had some carriers and cruisers that we started directing east from back up here. In this area, we had the Hermes and some heavy cruisers that were sailing southeast through toward the Banda Sea. But I don't know if I really want to engage them. I'm not sure how strong he is here. All we saw was a troop transport. But it might be worth an attempt at a Battle of Java Sea. His carrier strength here doesn't seem overwhelming. He's got a couple of Kates, obviously, but if I could sneak in a cruiser task force under the cover of some land-based fighters, that would be somewhat appealing. So you can see another 19 aircraft flew off the deck, 7 of them Kates, 7 bomb hits against the clan, whatever it's called. Didn't get the sinking graphic, or didn't hear it sinking. Presumably it will sink. Meanwhile, the Japanese fleet carriers striking at some cargo ships off Port Moresby. So they're moving, interestingly enough, toward the Torres Strait. I'm very curious if he will actually move to the Torres Strait or not. That would seem a little bit dicey, in my opinion, because that's going to run down a very narrow, shallow area that would be susceptible to submarines. Nonetheless, you can see here another 15 Vals and some Zeros and Claudes drop bombs on 2 cargo ships off the coast of Port Moresby. That's not super important. Okay. Alright, so the cargo ships there finally sank. Dive bombs aren't as great at sinking ships, unless they're Japanese tinderboxes. But obviously they did manage to do substantial, sufficient damage to sink a couple ships there. I think we're moving into the land combat phase. Alright, so the Japanese are bombarding at Changsha, where they also had some heavy air raids last turn. So go ahead and fast forward through that. You can see a whole bunch of Japanese divisions here. 25 Allied casualties, no Japanese casualties. Again, just suppression, no destroyed. Japanese, oh boy, here we come. This is probably it, guys. We got a shock attack at Nomaya here on the southern tip of New Caledonia. We don't have very much strength here. 1 Australian brigade of 51 assault value. The 39th Australian Battalion, just 2 assault value. 1 for an AA regiment, 3 for a coastal artillery regiment, 1 for a New Zealand pioneer company, and then 11 for the Free French New Caledonia detachment. This is probably going to end in a defeat, which would really suck. I mean, we're going to lose New Caledonia. I've been resigned to that since he landed at Comac a while ago. But it does kind of suck if this, you know, when this happens. He's got an overwhelming force. Just waiting to see what happens here. You can see the New Caledonia detachment has lost more than 50% of its strength. All these other units are all reduced to ineffective status. The 4th Australian Brigade's lost almost half its strength. The only question is whether they can plug the gap to hold for 1 more day or whether they are going to be overrun here. Lots of bombardment from the Japanese artillery. The Naval Guards units of theirs looked like they got shot up pretty good. Japanese reduced fortifications to level 0. They had 2-to-1 assault odds, but they didn't take the city. They didn't take the base. So that's good. Wow. I'm really surprised about that. We did lose 2 times as many squads destroyed, so we lost 22 squads destroyed. He lost 11. However, he lost 102 infantry squads disabled. We only lost 23 there. Granted, he has a lot more to lose, but that is substantial. He lost 785 casualties to our 551. He does outnumber us. I'm curious to see, he did get 2-to-1 odds. It'll be interesting to see if he tries to attack again. It looks like fortifications are down to level 0. So if that is in fact true, then he may just go for the coup de grace. He's got almost 5 times as much assault value as us. The only reason we didn't fall was the fort there. Nonetheless, one more day without New Caledonia falling to him, and these 11 victory points we get for destroying 11 Japanese squads. We're going to lose the entire force in New Caledonia anyway, which I think is like 250 squads, 250 victory points. But anything we can do to offset that loss by inflicting some casualties is great. And buy time. Another bombardment attack at Wankau. I'll go ahead and fast forward through that. Japanese actually lose casualties. We don't lose anything. Our troops there, despite very limited supply, have been very stubborn. Expanding fortifications. Oh, nice. We just rebuilt the fortifications immediately in Nomaya. So Nomaya expands back to level 1 forts. It will be interesting, again, with that level of disruption that he suffered in his attack if he tries again. If he does, I don't know if we can hope to do anything to stop him, but maybe that level 1 fort will cause some casualties or disruption. Maybe he'll wait a day. I'm hoping he waits one more day so we get through January 25th, and then he attacks on January 26th, and then we probably get overrun. But it'd be great to be able to hold for a couple more days, getting us closer to February, and the turning of the tide eventually. Meanwhile, it looks like we got a bunch of submarines. We got some RAF units all arriving. And let's see here. Pursuit groups arriving at eastern U.S. Bomber headquarters. I think some of these guys I had moved via rail. But, all right. So let's go ahead and let's jump in. I think the combat results, this is save 10 is where I've already issued most of my orders. I think the combat results will carry through, because there was nothing there because I hadn't played the combat results. But let's see. So we jump in here. Yes, okay, good. So it does load the results, even though the results weren't loaded previously. Okay, so let me take a sip of the water and check in with the chat real quick. Ooh, I should get different I wonder if there's different tiers of subscribers or whatever where you can, or different, I don't know. I feel like I need a Mark 14 emoji or a hit but no explosion emoji or something. Instead, I just have the Butcher and the Iron Brigade Soldier. I have a third one. I can't upload it on Twitch. You have to have, I think, at least 25 subscribers before you're allowed to have 3 emojis. But on Discord, I have the Glencairn whiskey or scotch glass that's in our Single Malt Strategy podcast logo. All right, so these guys are returning to Pearl. They laid their mines. So we just put a bunch of mines down at Johnston Island. He's had a sub that just kind of hangs out here, and he keeps asking what's going on there. So we just laid almost 200 mines at Johnston. Maybe we'll get lucky and one of his ships will run into a minefield. Our carriers are still on the way to New Zealand via the long route. They're just kind of, again, taking the wide berth. In one large task force. They're a ways away. They're going to be there in I don't even know if it shows me how many days, but they're 100, is it 114 hexes away? At 4 hexes per phase. So they're going to be a while before arriving. these mine warfare ships are coming back to Pearl. Did they lay their mines? They did not. Probably because I told them not to. So let's put these guys on Christmas Island, because I think that's a really important base. So we had some destroyer mine layers that were laying mines at Christmas Island. We're also unloading some fuel there, about 26,000. We've already got 11,000 there. Christmas Island, the intent there is for it to be one of our key chain links in the supply line to New Zealand or Australia, if that even ends up mattering, given that, you know, he's trying to cut that line. Port's up to level 2. I'll expand fortifications there. Palmyra, meanwhile, port is at 1. We should expand that. Expand fortifications 2. Penrith is unloading supply on this island. Okay. Pago Pago has plenty of supply. We have units unloading fuel there. Let's take a look at New Caledonia. That's interesting. There's something down here, but let's take a look at New Caledonia first. Okay, so the New Caledonia garrison is down to 42 assault value. They started at 170 or 180 or something like that. You can see here most of these units are pretty badly beat up. We actually do have a reasonable amount of anti-aircraft guns, but he hasn't hit us with anything there, so we're going to lose 36 AA guns, which is going to kind of suck. We also have some coastal guns there. The militia, for the most part, is all beat up. The engineers are all beat up. We still do have some AA guns in this unit, but again, he's not flying anything over, so those guns have nothing to shoot at. Some of our engineers are still there, still working. Obviously, they upgraded the fortifications. You can see the Free French units have 6 squads still in the fight. They also still have some artillery, which probably comes in handy, along with 21 that are disabled. The 4th Australian Brigade is a little bit more than 50% out of action. You can see 39 squads disabled versus 28 still in action. They have 6 Vickers sections left, so I assume that's Vickers machine guns. 4 18-pounders. They also do have 1 2-pound anti-tank gun. He's been attacking with some armor, I think. He's been boasting about it, and we haven't really been destroying anything, so those anti-tank guns have been doing their job. And then the 39th Australian Battalion is entirely made of regulars, but is entirely out of the fight, so that kind of sucks. Some of these guys are gaining a little bit of experience. You can see the 4th Australian Light AA Regiment actually has a 70 experience, 78 morale. It's a good unit. It's going to kind of suck to lose them. Some of the units don't have as much, although the New Caledonia force is up to 55. 4th Australian Brigade is at 38 experience, so again, that plays into their effectiveness. So my guess is if he attacks again next turn, those troops are goners. Let's actually get this Hudson out of there and move it to Brisbane, because I don't want them to just lose a plane just because. And that unit's going to have to withdraw anyway in the next month or so. So there's that. Meanwhile, let's take a look. It looks like he has a bunch of ships, probably bringing supply or anti-sub or maybe sweeping mines at Comac. Maybe bringing engineers down, I'm not sure. But we can see here there's another Japanese task force down here, southeast of Nomaya, southwest of Suva, and it says they are moving southeast. So we have seen XTRG multiple times bypass our defensive lines and try and create tripwires between us and our supply line. I'm not too worried about New Caledonia shutting down New Zealand, but if he got troops onto Raoul Island and established an airfield there, it certainly could. Now, it's unlikely he would ever be able to build an airbase up large enough at Raoul Island in the first place, because Raoul Island has a 1 stack max, so he could probably build it up to level 2, but it would take him a long, long time to be able to build it up to any kind of major base. That being said, he could still get recon and float planes there that would be able to see everything that we move supply-wise and allow him to basically conduct raids at his leisure. I don't think he's going toward Tongatapu, sort of south of Fiji, because based off what we're seeing here, it says southeast, which would be this direction, directly at Raoul. If he was moving directly east, then he might be moving toward the Tonga Islands. West would be Norfolk. Fiji would be north, so it does look like he's moving toward Raoul Island. Now, as you recall, we did put some destroyers at Norfolk Island to go after some subs we had seen there. We have a second group of subs going toward Lord Howe Island. but we also have some destroyers on their way toward Raoul, just because, again, he's really been scouting out a lot of these bases with his submarines in this vicinity. So I've ordered these 2 destroyers to head to Raoul at flank speed, and they will remain on station there. So hopefully this isn't a substantial force. It could also be a submarine, but if it's a submarine, then these guys are going to do their job anyway, because these are ASW ships, as a reminder. So they're on ASW. If he is moving toward Raoul with submarines, then they'll do their job, and if he's moving somewhere else, whatever. These tankers are moving out of the way. I think we had also dispatched a group of 2 heavy cruisers and a destroyer. We had them on their way toward Auckland, mainly to transfer back here because we got a couple of cruisers at Auckland that just came out of the shipyards. So I have actually ordered these guys to move southwest toward Raoul as well, at flank speed, just out of fear, again, that they might be trying to pull a hard one or a fast one on us and sneak in and take an unoccupied island. So if that's the case, hopefully we get there in time and our commanders are aggressive enough to give him a little bit of a surprise. It looks like this task force leader is 56 in terms of aggression, so maybe the Pensacola or Minneapolis can kind of give him a little bit of a bloody nose and then move back toward Auckland and rejoin the fleet there. You can see we did have the Australia, the Perth, and the Marblehead come out of the docks, so we now have 2 light cruisers and a heavy cruiser that are ready at New Zealand. We've already sent all our destroyers off on these ASW raids. Or not raids, but ASW patrols. We can call them back when necessary. We've got 3 more days till the Canberra is ready, and then another week until the New Orleans is ready. But we're rebuilding our heavy cruiser strength that had been battered but not destroyed at the Battle of Comac, and things are falling into place a little bit. I mean, it could be a tiny SNLF, it could be a scout, it could be a sub. I don't really know, but I'm at least moving forces to converge in the direction he's going, and we'll see what ends up happening. Because, he's done it multiple times. He took the Ellis Islands, he took Canton, he took Baker Island, all with these skeleton forces that have he took Savi as well. That wasn't a small force, that was a naval guard force. But nonetheless, we don't have anything there. I don't have any troops I can get there anytime soon. It's a dot base, so it's underdeveloped, so it's hard to unload outside of Lake Amphibious. So we want to make sure, obviously, that he doesn't take Raoul Island. Norfolk Island, meanwhile, I think I've got some troops on the way to Norfolk. I just don't remember where they are. Over here? Yeah, we've got 1,200 troops of the 34th Combat Engineer Regiment on the way to Norfolk Island. These guys are, if we show, these guys have an assault value of about 50. They're also valuable because they're engineers. So I'm going to move those guys to Norfolk Island because, again, we had him scouting us out at Norfolk with some submarines as well. And this is where I assumed he was going, but so far he hasn't. Nonetheless, Norfolk makes for a nice little intermediary between New Caledonia and New Zealand to kind of act as a tripwire for him. And that's a reasonable force that he shouldn't just be able to land an SNLF force on and take it without opposition. So we'll land there, and then we'll, build up some fortifications and some strength. I think Lord Howe is probably too far west for him to make a play for. It's so close to Australia. We could bomb it from Brisbane with B-17s or whatever. So I'm not sure if he would actually make that aggressive of a play or not. Meanwhile, we're getting some of our aircraft back online after taking a bit of time to get into place there. All right, so his carriers are still moving northwest toward the Torres Strait. We have subs chasing from behind. We also have one sub that's in their path, and it's not a Mark 14 sub, it's an S-36, so it's not a good sub per se, but it does have good torpedoes. So if we can get in there and interrupt these guys, that would be great. We're still trying to run away with 2 tankers that both had to use op points up, so can't move as far, as well as our light cruisers here, which are all trying to run toward Darwin, which isn't particularly safe, but it's a refueling point. I'm also pulling out my troop transports and AMs that are in Darwin in case he's going for a raid on Darwin. He may be moving his carriers through the Torres Strait and making a raid on northern Australia and then moving into the Dutch East Indies. We'll have to see, but that is something that we are planning for and keeping our eyes out for. Move all my tankers to Townsville. If I moved my tankers to town, all of my tankers, like every tanker I have, because that would probably be silly, I would think. We do have one tanker in Townsville that I'm actually moving south. He's far enough away, I think, where I can hug the coast and kind of sprint out of there. And then I've also got one other tanker here, the British Destiny, which is currently in port at Cairns, that is not doing anything. The only reason I'm not moving it is I'm worried if he moves south, he'll see it. And it seems like if they hide in port, unless he issues port attack orders, they're relatively safe. We have a cruiser mine layer at Port Moresby that didn't get hit last turn, and some cargo ships that are all in port at Moresby. So if he doesn't actually bomb the port itself, those guys seem a little bit more safe. Okay. Meanwhile, the real thrust of this turn, of this drive here into the Dutch East Indies, you can see here he's landing troops on Manadao, light troops, only 1,400 soldiers. We actually have 68 assault value on the island. I don't know if, or on the base. I don't know if that's more than what he has. If he really only has 1,400 men, that might be. But also, I'm seeing tankers and cruiser mine layers. There's no way that's a tanker. Maybe a cargo ship bringing more troops into Manadao? I'm not sure. In any event, we probably, if this is all he's really got, we might be able to hold out. The problem with the Dutch troops is their morale is so low, and their experience is pretty low too. So that's a big pullback on their effectiveness, which probably means we shouldn't attack with them. But at least hold out, prevent him from being able to use Manadao, which is a level 3 airbase capable of level 7. This by itself is going to be a serious advantage for him if he gets it soon. This was a fast transport. I would guess maybe this is a full-blown transport. Meanwhile, we can see he's got light carriers here. It says 56 fighters and 50 bombers. We didn't see anything like that in terms of numbers. I'm pretty sure this is his CVEs and CVLs task force moving southwest toward Kendari. We also have our own light carrier, nowhere near that air wing. It has 14 swordfish with 12 torpedoes. She's moving slowly down this direction toward the southwestern coast near Kendari. We're also moving our cruisers, the Cornwall and the Exeter, in that general vicinity as well. Additionally, we have brought in some 50 fighter aircraft, all in good order, all in good fatigue, more or less, that are based at Mascar. So we have 50 fighters that are running a cap over the carrier and the cruiser task force as it moves south. Hopefully those 50 fighters will be enough to ensure that he can't launch an effective torpedo strike against the carriers, and then we can maybe get a lick or two in against the invasion task force and then run away. We're also pulling some of our subs back here to set up a new tripwire near Kendari and near Ambion in the event that he's moving toward either of those bases. Both these task forces are moving, well, these guys are moving west, so maybe they're going toward Lowak. If he is, there's nothing I'm going to do to stop him. It's a level 0 airfield currently up to level 4, but I can't stop that, so if he wants to land there, fine. But these guys are moving southwest, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. We've got our AVP, the Bellatrix, which is trying to escape at full speed. Definitely doesn't have fuel for that. Mission speed it does, but there's no way it's going to get away. So this guy's going to probably draw some Japanese carrier strikes against it, which could be a useful diversion, you know, pulling fighters and bombers away from our potential threat, which is going to be coming south here. And we'll see if we can interdict him or not. Meanwhile, just a little bit to the west, we've got some tankers that are moving around here. This guy's moving south. He's going to be a little shy on fuel. This guy is moving to Balikpapan, which seems like a really disastrously bad idea, so we're going to move him to Oosthaven instead, because that is further away from the oncoming Japanese vessels. I don't think they're going to come this far south, but again, I don't want to, if they see something with a scout plane or they're set to react or something like that, I don't want to risk that. I'm surprised the Surabaya has 33 system damage. I wonder if I took a torpedo or something from an enemy sub or something. In any event, we're going to pull these guys back toward Balikpapan also. These guys to Jalap, that's fine. And these guys are going to Oosthaven. Did I say Balikpapan? I'm moving them to Oosthaven. These guys just came from Oosthaven. Aden, refill Cape Town. And they're going to Perth. Okay, so we've got 28,000 fuel on these guys going to Perth, and we've got 26,000 fuel going to Perth here. We also have another one tanker that can load 5,000 at Oosthaven. So we're up to 26,000 fuel at Oosthaven. 36,000. I swear Palembang is still producing some fuel. He's over 400,000 oil at Palembang. I wish I could turn that off. Meanwhile, he hasn't made a move on Singapore yet. You can see we're digging in and kind of trying to get our troops back up to strength. 27th Australian Brigade, for example, resting and recuperating at Singapore, getting our defense level, our preparation level up for the defense of Singapore. Still a good amount of supply. Meanwhile, over at Bataan, you can see here that we have a large number of assault value, 1,800 in a couple of different divisions. A good amount of supply. We just unloaded another 1,000 supply points here, although between the air raids and several, almost a week of time since the last one came in, we were down about 2,000 supply. That being said, the extra 1,000 should help. It's up to 49.1. And then we've got another 600 supply coming in on the Zeeman, which will take a few days, so we'll see if it actually makes it there. But if it does, then the Zeeman will get some more supply into Bataan as well. Our troops in the south here near Kaigan are still hanging on. He's taken most of Mindanao in the south of the Philippines, but we do have a couple of good divisions and units here that are hanging on, trying to defend stuff. Okay. All right. Jack, the big boy carriers are south of Pearl Harbor right now. At least our big boy carriers. They're nowhere near being able to interdict in the Dutch East Indies or anything else like that. Yeah, but Kyle, I have the oil refineries turned off. The refineries at Palembang have been shut to off in terms of production. So the 900 oil generation is on. I can't turn that off. I have turned repair off. But the refinery, which produces 1,200 fuel per turn, and I think 500? Or is it maybe it's 400 fuel per turn and like 200 supply or something like that? I've turned production on this off. Oh. Oil wells make some fuel too? All right. Well, I guess then I probably won't be able to draw down fuel levels any further than they already are. In any event, where were we? So he is attacking at Changsha. It looks like he might be bringing an additional unit in here from Wuchang to move toward Changsha. Again, he's got way more than 1,100 troops. That's all he's been bombarding us with, but he's got 20 units there. We have a fair amount of troops here as well, 3,100 garrison. The supplies are okay right now. We only have 6,600 that we can draw from, but at least the units that are currently here do have enough supply. None of their units are in the red or yellow in terms of the supply actually assigned to the unit. Meanwhile, we're preparing for the base as well, but he's did inflict a little bit. I think we were at like 3,200 assault value. One other thing that I'm trying that might be a little bit risky, we know there's one Japanese division here, a battered division that we did drive back southeast of Changsha. We have 1,100 assault value here, and I am moving my troops north to try and intercept and deal that Japanese unit a bit of a blow. So we should arrive next turn, and then we can go ahead and attack the following turn. Should definitely drive that division back and do some serious damage to it. It does expose us if he decides to peel off troops from Changsha, but my logic is this. If he pulls substantial troops away from Changsha, so if we defeat that division and he wants to defeat our troops, he'll probably need to pull 2 to 3 divisions away from Changsha, which will be 1,200 to 1,500 assault value, which would effectively have what we've actually seen in his troops in terms of his assault value at Changsha. So if he pulls away half his strength there, then maybe we can launch an attack on his troops in the Changsha province and drive the bulk of his force back. It's a bit risky, right? It does expose 1,000 assault value, which you don't have a ton of in China, to an open field engagement against the Japanese forces, which is just asking to be drubbed. That being said, if I just move these guys into Changsha itself, frankly, I think they're just going to get chewed up over time, and he's going to drive us back. This is my theory on how to completely derail or at least substantially delay his movements. Meanwhile, I think we're gonna try a cap over Changsha. We have Flying Tigers here. They're not good up to 25,000 feet, so you can see here our aircraft data on these means that if we go to 25,000, their maneuverability is only 11. We know he's flying at 25,000, his cap in any event. So what we're going to do is we're probably going to have these guys sit at around 15,000, hoping that if he's 10,000 feet above us, there is always a chance his units won't all intercept us. Yes, they'll get a big advantage diving on us, but they're going to have a big maneuverability advantage anyway because they're zeros versus P-40s. And if we're down around 15,000 feet, that gives us a better chance to intercept his bombers, which are not coming in at 25,000. So we're going to do a long-range cap over Changsha with 100% of our fighters, 100% long-range cap. We're going to set these 23 fighters to 15,000, and then his bombers have been coming in, I think, at about 12. So we're going to set these guys to long-range cap as well over Changsha, and we're going to set these guys, and everybody's at fatigue 0, so that should help a lot. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set these guys to a lower altitude at maybe... Actually, we'll set these guys at 20, so we'll kind of have a tiered defense. We'll have the 15 up at 20. They'll get intercepted first, I think. That's the way the game works. Then the 15 that are lower might be able to dive on the bombers. No J Street, I did not send the carriers to Shangri-La. Jack Tank, I said the American carriers are south of Pearl Harbor. All right. Okay. Where's this guy going? He's just hanging out here. Just his 3 rifle squads. Just like, hey, dude, we got 42 infantry troops. We're just keeping an eye on Xinjiang. Just chilling. Actually, that poses an interesting idea. I'm going to move this small group to try and intercept this rail line here. So 600 troops to try and cut this railway. Because I don't think he can get back. He can't send more reinforcements to Wuchang and Changsha if we interdict this rail line. So we'll try and cut his direct rail line toward the Changsha offensive. If he decides he doesn't have enough troops, is going to get cut by moving troops here. I actually think... I kind of want to halt these guys moving back. I mean, he's got way more troops at Luoyang than I can effectively attack. But I don't know if I want to... I guess I do. I think I saw something last turn about intelligence of him preparing for an offensive on Sian. I don't see anything here for that, but... You can see here some intelligence. Oh yeah, 78th Infantry Regiment's planning for an attack on Sian, so I'm assuming that's where he's going. Imperial Guards, I'm planning for an attack in Singapore. That's nothing surprising. Anything else in the intelligence? Raiding Regiment located at Truk, okay. Construction Battalion is located at Miri, probably trying to repair the oil wells that suffered all that damage. Road Construction Battalion or Company is loaded on an APD, moving to Truk. I wish I knew where it was. So he's moving some engineers to Truk. I mean, we've got a bunch of subs in the Truk region anyway. Okay, so... Let's see. These guys, those are bombers. Hawks. That's not a Hawk 75. Doesn't look like a Hawk 75. Experience 42. Not very good. We'll keep them training. Meanwhile, do we have anything else we can send these guys to Chang'e? Any other fighters? 15 DC-2s. Wow, only 300 supply at Nanyang. That's yikes. So we can drop some supply into Nanyang. We've got some DC-2s in China. Pull some supply forward from Xi'an, which doesn't have a ton of supply itself either, but whatever. All right. So A29A Hudsons, we've got 8 of them ready at Quailan. Ground attack against these troops. Set all level bombers. See if we can get a unescorted raid in on those guys. Okay. Meanwhile, back at Rangoon. Our aircraft here, we've got about 80 aircraft at Rangoon. 16 of those are fighters. The rest are bombers. So there's that. I don't see anything worth attacking at the moment. I don't have any level bomber reinforcements, really. We've got B-17Ds. We've got pretty much nothing in the pool except a handful of LB-30 Liberators. So I don't have a lot going on there. Some of our troops down here, like the 63rd Indian Brigade and Armored Brigade, are moving toward Rangoon. We're moving some other forces around here. We're building a line of fortifications in India as well as in Malaya. Okay, Singapore, what's its defenses at? 72, so almost to level 4 forts. Do I have these guys moving somewhere? No. They can't attack anyway. Okay. So, yeah, that's the situation right now. We'll see what develops in the Celebes area down by the Banda Sea. We'll see what happens on New Caledonia if he holds off on attacking. We'll also see what happens between Norfolk, Raoul, and Tongatapu in terms of whatever that Japanese force is. Our own carriers are over here, moving south from Pearl Harbor, mining up some key bases and logistical points along the way. We're in the process of transferring some forces to San Diego and trying to get some more troop transports there so we can move more forces away. We got the 1st Canadian Battalion, the Brockville Rifles, into Seattle. We're loading up the, what are they? The Edmonton Fusiliers now. And then after that, we will be moving the 2nd Canadian Scottish Battalion to form the 15th Canadian Infantry Brigade at Seattle, which will then rail down to San Diego to begin moving into the South Pacific. Anything else? The other British fleet carrier is still kind of a ways out of action. She's up here moving south from the Middle East. And we're in the process of getting some troop transports to Aden to load up an Australian infantry division, which is located there as well. These guys are loading up some aircraft to move them to Karachi. And is the Lysander the biplane? Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the situation right now, right? Like, these guys are loading fuel. These guys are loading fuel. We're pouring fuel into India. Yeah. So I don't have a lot else to say at the moment. We're building up fortifications at Rangoon. If I can get those fortifications up to like 6 or 7, that would be pretty awesome with a ton of supply, but we'll see. With that being said, guys, I think that's probably going to do it for this turn. Let me check in with the chat before we go, and then we'll probably also do a brief stream of a Legionary's life, maybe like 30, 40 minutes of that, if you guys want to stick around for that. But let me just check in with you guys real quick, if there's anything you want to see before we wrap up here. Yep, Kyle, I've already issued those orders to the subs. The Burma sliver units are converging where they can consolidate into divisions and brigades, or at least the ones that can. The other smaller ones, I'm not... So I do have a few units up here, some of these sliver units. Most of these guys are actually engineers, so you can see here this is a base force. So I'm building up fortifications at each one of these bases here. So if he does advance through the central Burma, that we can defend from there. Additionally, I do have a couple of small infantry units here that are in place largely to provide a tripwire for him before he gets there, because I need to be mindful of the fact that I've got good railways and good interior lines, so I can always rail south to Pegu from central Burma. But he also could move through this roadway here through central Burma, which is usually the tactic that I take, and flank the entire position. So I do want to leave some tripwires in place to prevent that. In the event that we do decide we want to move these guys, battalions are small, so it only takes 2 days to move them onto trains, and then they move pretty quick. So for the moment, we're protecting our flank up here, but obviously that's something we have to keep an eye on. Actually, there is one thing I should do here. For the Mandalay BMP, like a Russian BMP, for the 3rd Burma Rifles, we're going to strat move these guys to north of Pegu to try and prevent a flanking maneuver, more as a scout than anything. And I think we'll move the railway battalion to one more hex north here too, and that way we're guarding the flank should he try and go up the railway and around. We wouldn't have railway access, but we would still have supply access north through Mandalay through a road just to the rear here if necessary. But U.S. East Coast units haven't arrived yet. I do not have the swordfish. I think you're talking about the wildebeest. The wildebeest squadrons are in Australia. There's no point in moving them into the Dutch East Indies because they'll just get shot to pieces because we don't have any headquarters units on any of these bases. So we don't have any torpedoes for them to use. And without headquarters bases, you can't use torpedoes. So no real purpose sending them back into harm's way when I have no way to really use the key advantage that they provide. Their bombs can be effective. Yes, they're 1,000-pounders, but they don't have very good experience for that. Plus, I don't want to get them obliterated. Do we have a headquarter unit in Darwin? We do. But I don't have an aviation unit. I think that's the issue. I mean, I guess I could fly him north to... What's the range? Naval bombing, land bombing, low naval attack. They only have 5 or 4 range, though. So they could carry an extended range strike to Kandari itself. In terms of ships lost, I don't think we lost anything last turn. Well, we lost 1 cargo ship. 2 cargo ships. We lost the British cargo ship, the Coast Farmer, and the Admiral Halstead, all to Japanese carrier bombers. 1 in the Celebes area, and then 2 near Port Moresby. In terms of aircraft, lost last turn. 11 Japanese aircraft were lost. Interesting. He lost 4 zeros to ops losses. So that's probably some of his carrier planes, actually, that he lost, which is nice, because that means pilots, too, since he did operate. Lost 1 Val, 1 Claude. Hey, Sergeant Twinkie. All right. Well, I guess we'll see what happens in the next episode. That'll be an interesting one to watch. We have a couple of different things that could be occurring. We could have a naval battle near Celebes. We could have a carrier battle near Celebes. We could have a naval battle near New Zealand. A small one, I'm hoping. We only see 1 ship. We could see Comac fall. Or, sorry, not Comac. We could see Nomaya fall. We arrive here in the rear of the Chinese offensive, the Japanese-Chinese offensive near Changsha. We might have a chance to knock out a Japanese division pretty badly, which we've already bloodied a bit. This is going to be a pretty exciting next couple of turns, so we'll have to see how things play out. With that being said, guys, I'm going to go grab some water real quick, and then I am going to... I don't have any bombers at Port Moresby, like a G-Man. I think I just have recon. I got a couple of Hudsons, but there's nothing worth bombing. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of War in the Pacific. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please feel free to leave your comments below, and until next time, I'm out.